welcome to December's agenda. Before that, we do have a public comment. So if you'd like to come forward and give us your name.
Okay, my name is Jane Neiman. I'm actually presenting for Mary Balance, who couldn't be here.
Okay.
So what I'm about to read to you
So
is
it's not
her
you,
work.
it's Mary.
It's
Okay.
me talking for Mary.
Okay.
I am Mary's
Surrogate.
alter ego.
Yeah.
Avatar.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. Okay. Much of what we know about class size comes from an experiment called Project STAR, also known as the Tennessee Study. From 1985 to 1989, 11,600 Tennessee students from kindergarten to third grade were randomly assigned to 3 class size categories. The 3 class sizes were 13 to 17 students, that was the small, 22 to 25 was the medium, and over 25 was the large. The results were strong. An average student assigned to the smallest classes had a reading score nearly 8% higher than students in the medium-sized classes, and had, on average, a 9% higher math score. From U of M, Gerald R. Ford School of Public Policy Education Policy Initiative from September 2016, the risk of large classes in Michigan is not evenly distributed across race, economic level, or urbanicity. Black ninth graders are over 3 times as likely as their white peers to be in large classes. Students receiving meal subsidies are 60 to 70% more likely to be in large classes than their peers not receiving subsidies. Nearly 1 in 4 ninth graders in urban districts are in a class of 40 or more, while only 1 in 50 students in rural districts find themselves in such classes. In Michigan, who will find themselves in 40-plus classes? Urban students, high poverty students, students on meal subsidies, Black and Latino students, lowest achieving students, 2 times more likely than highest achieving peers. Other literature that strongly supports the common sense notion that class size is an important determinant of student outcomes. Class size reduction has been shown to improve a variety of measures, ranging from contemporaneous test scores to later in life outcomes such as college completion. Class size is an important determinant of, well, I already read that. Nope. That is an important determinant of student outcomes and one that can be directly influenced by policy. All else being equal, increasing class sizes will harm student outcomes. The evidence suggests that increasing class size will harm not only children's test scores in the short run, but also their long-term human capital formation. Money saved today by increasing class sizes will be offset by more substantial social and educational costs in the future. The payoff from class size reduction is larger for low-income and minority children, while any increases in class size will likely be most harmful to these populations. Policymakers should carefully weigh the efficacy of class size reduction against other potential uses of funds. While lower class size has a demonstrable cost, it may prove the more cost-effective policy overall. What do reduced class sizes do? Smaller classes in early grades are associated with better test scores. Smaller classes in early grades are associated with better long-term outcomes. Class reduction helps make an even bigger difference for experienced teachers. Class sizes, student-teacher ratios have risen in recent years. Other advantages of reducing class size: reduce negative behaviors, reduce referrals for interventions, increase in relationships with students and parents, increase in engagement behaviors. The current bargaining agreement class size is K2 25, a recommended maximum of 25, and 3-6 is a recommended maximum of 27. And then she presents the statistics for GRPS, which was sent to her. 6 out of 9, 67% class of the classes at campus were above the recommended maximum. The highest is 33. Brookside, it was 3 of 7, 43%. Highest was 30 students in a class. MLK, 43%, 3 out of 7. The highest class size there was 30. Burton Elementary, 4 out of 11. The highest there is 27. Kenosha, 1 of 3. The highest there was 29. Kent Hills, 2 out of 6. Highest was 27. C.A. Frost, 4 out of 13 classes. The highest count was 27. Buchanan, 3 of 12. Congress, 2 of 8, 25%. Sherwood was 20%. Aberdeen was 20%. And Dickinson was 17%. Palmer, 17. Stocking, 17. Chavez, 17. Okay, the 8 other buildings do not have sections over the 25 or 27 student numbers.
8 of our buildings do not have
Do
classes.
not have elementary buildings. This is, I think she's focusing on elementary
Elementary. Okay,
particularly,
yep.
possibly because of the K-3 reading law. But she said 8 of the buildings do not have any classes that are over the 25 or 27. 15 of 23 schools have at least one classroom over the sizes for a total of 35 of 185, or 19%. 6 are kindergarten, 14 are first grade, 10 are second grade, and 6 are in our third grade classrooms.
You want to go ahead and...
Sum up?
Yeah,
Yep.
thanks.
So, to summarize, Russ Walls, retired administrator, recommends for high poverty districts a K-2 class size of 17 to 19, at 3rd through 8th grade of 20 to 22, and 9th through 12 of 23 to 25. And that recommendation was from May of 2016. And just basically, I think what Mrs. Bowens is trying to say is that although it would cost more, the outcomes for smaller class size tend to be worth the investment. And it does create a need for additional teachers, and there is a teacher shortage, we are aware. But teachers coming to GRPS and applying, knowing that they would have smaller class sizes, would be, something that would be a positive. Would be something to consider coming here, that that you would have a lower class size, would be able to have more of an effect and communicate better with parents and be able to increase those test scores and improve instruction overall. So that is
Okay.
Mary's research. I thank you for letting me present that to
Yeah,
you today.
thank you.
Thank you.
Instructional council?
That's me.
Oh, that's,
Sorry,
you're
doubling up
taking
today.
your hat off. All right.
I got asked to do Mary's thing last night, so.
Okay. Instructional council.
All right, so on November 21st, the instructional council met. We heard a report on the 7th, 8th grade Spanish 3 course that is being taught at Southwest Community Campus, and also heard a presentation on a reproductive health curriculum from the special ed department. Reproductive health curriculum is called Making a Difference. It was presented by Tony Moore and Laura Lamore. And it is a program that is to be implemented in the self-contained special education classrooms from 6th to 12th grade in 4 comprehensive middle and 2 high schools in the district. The reason for this addition is because the students with IEPs normally go to the health classes with the gen ed kids, but the kids in the self-contained program do not. And so this would resolve a gap in their curriculum, and it is to be implemented almost immediately, starting in January. Right, Tony? Correct. Okay. Yep. So that was the first presentation. The instructional council voted unanimously to implement this curriculum immediately. And there's training and assistance being provided by the special education department in conjunction with KISD and also nursing professionals. So it was a great idea. And everybody was excited to see this come to the self-contained students. The other presentation was by Julian Ramirez-Torres on the Spanish 3 course being offered at Southwest as Southwest expands into high school. They decided to run the Spanish 3 course with its current 7th, 8th graders, being an immersion program. Weren't sure how well, or how, I shouldn't say how well, but how much language had been retained and at what level the kids would end up in after K-6 immersion. And we are pleased to announce that the initial testing in writing and reading was very high. Students are performing for the Spanish 3 course at a very high level. There is further testing to be done in speaking and listening comprehension. But as of right now, it looks like that Southwest Community Campus Elementary program is very effective in teaching Spanish language, and that we need to offer a more rigorous curriculum for those students as they advance in their secondary education. And that is being discussed and worked on as well.
Now, these are English language students who are taking Spanish.
Well, they're in the immersion program at Southwest, so Southwest is proposing a 90-10, 90% Spanish, 10% English, and then it goes to 80-20. and then eventually phases to 50-50 by high school.
It's dual immersion.
it's dual
So
immersion.
that's where my kids go. So some of the kids come in and their primary language is Spanish.
But some are
Both
English.
treated the same way.
Correct.
Yep, exactly. Yep. So it looks good. It looks like we need to challenge them even further, though. So,
I'm sure your kids will be happy here.
but we're probably going to hear some more reports soon because Mr. Ramirez only had the data from reading and writing for us at this time. But they are looking at that right now and investigating that and trying to determine, as they move up through the grades, what the next steps are and what the offerings need to be. So, but it was great. We are meeting next in December on the 19th. We will be hearing about a course that is being prepared, a proposal being prepared by a teacher at Union on Spanish for Spanish speakers. We are going to hear an update possibly from Amy Powney from the math department on the elementary math program that's being implemented. So we will see you in January with our next report.
Okay,
Great.
good.
Thank you.
Is it possible to either get a highlight or a abbreviation of the reproductive program that you guys are teaching to the academic committee, or
A highlight or a copy of
just
curriculum?
basic chapters, what you guys are teaching, or
Sure, we'll make
Okay.
a note of that and then,
Awesome.
and connect with Tony and Laura Lamore. We can get you an overview of what that is.
Great.
Yep, sure.
This is a distinct curriculum from what the curriculum would be for the
That is-
non-special ed students.
That is correct.
Okay.
Thank you.
thank you.
You are welcome.
All right. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Dr. Baker and Ms. Downs-Lewis and Ms. Davis, Reverend Matias. So we have one primary report to the Academic Achievement Committee today. That's by Dr. Gunnell regarding the Center for Applied Linguistics, or CAL proposal. So you want me to go ahead?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thanks for coming.
So we were talking about Southwest, and this proposal is inclusive of Southwest. But before I go through the PowerPoint, I want to set a little context and background. So first of all, in Grand Rapids, we have 17 cultural centers. Those 17 cultural centers provide services for English language learners. Out of those 17, there are 4 schools whose model is not purely an ESL model. So we have 3 models in Grand Rapids for English language learners. One is the ESL model, which is for schools where there's a variety of languages. So we use ESL strategies to teach students English. The second model, as you well know, because we just talked a little bit about it, is the dual language immersion model at Southwest, in which there are students of both primary languages. There's students of English primary language and students of Spanish primary language, and they're learning both English and Spanish with the goal of being bilingual, bicultural, and biliterate by the time they finish at Southwest, which is now up to 8th grade, but in the future, it'll go up to 12th grade. And then the third model that we have is called a bilingual transitional model, and that has 3 schools: Buchanan, Burton Elementary, and Cesar Chavez. Now, the rationale for the bilingual transitional in those schools is because the majority of students that go into those 3 schools, primary language is Spanish. Because you would not use a bilingual transitional model if my primary language is not something other than English. So I could have a bilingual transitional model if the majority of kids were Chinese or Kinyarwanda, but you have to have that one significant primary language other than English, majority. So that's why we have it at those specific 3 schools.
Buchanan, Chavez, and what was the third one?
Buchanan, Burton Elementary, and Cesar Chavez. Okay? Within the transitional bilingual model, within all the models, the ESL is part of it, because you are learning, the goal for us is for students to learn English, correct? The goal in Southwest Community Campus is for biliteracy. So that's one aspect of this, because I wanted you to know the background of the models. The second aspect is, about a year ago, maybe even 18 months ago, when we started talking about Southwest Community Campus High School, there were community forums, parent forums, community got involved. You were, many of you were part of that. And the feedback from parents in the community in that corridor, whereby those schools are around that area, Southwest, Buchanan, Burton, and Cesar Chavez, the community input was, why not have students at the other cultural centers be bilingual, right? Because the transitional bilingual model at Buchanan, Burton, and Cesar Chavez, once you become, that starts in kindergarten, and you're taking away the Spanish while adding the English. So when you are in a transitional bilingual program, the guarantee of being bilingual, biliterate, is not going to happen. Do you see where I'm going with that? So basically, you're cutting off, not because we wanted to, but because by third grade, they're taking the M step, and we wanted them to be proficient in English. So I wanted to set that context, because then I'm going to go into the proposal, the rationale for the proposal. Do you have any questions about the context or the background I just set?
Not the context. So,
Okay.
that's good. It's good to know. Good stuff, so.
So the proposal for the Center for Applied Linguistics has to do with auditing those 4 programs that I just mentioned. The three schools that have the transitional bilingual, and Cesar and Southwest Community Campus, which is the dual language immersion. The rationale for the reason of the proposal is to look at those models in those 4 schools and see, number one, what is the best model? If we're looking at having a dual language immersion for all 4 schools, what would be the best? Would it be a one-way for the 3 schools that are now transitional bilingual, or would it be a 2-way? So we're looking at those 4 schools to see what may best fit, given the input of the families and the parents and the teachers and the administrators. So then I can go into the proposal itself. Okay? So this proposal, I wanted to ask you, did you get both the PowerPoint and the proposal itself?
I didn't get anything.
Is it, what do you have? You have, I didn't actually pull it up, so.
When I looked,
In board docs?
I have that
In board
as
docs.
well as the
Okay, yes,
proposal.
yes.
So do you want a copy while I'm speaking to it?
I'll take a copy, because when I looked, it wasn't
I didn't
on
make-
But
there.
it's also in front of us, Maida.
No,
I
mean.
the PowerPoint is in front
Oh,
of
that, okay, I see.
This is just a PowerPoint.
Okay, then, that's
Thank
great.
you.
to have.
So the PowerPoint is an overview or a highlight of the proposal. The proposal is more in detail as to the proposed dates and how many, when they'll come up with their report. It's more detailed. So, am I going forward here?
Oh, just use if you want to use that clicker, you can turn it on the side. Or else just use your arrows. Right here. Dr. Gunn, other side. Flip that switch. There you go.
Okay. So here you go.
Right arrow.
So the Center for Applied Linguistics is going to do the following. They would spend some time with us in February, and that's in the proposal, and it would be specific to the 4 schools that we just talked about. And they would collect information about the program models and they would provide current practices and recommendations for us, given their visits and their because they would also do focus groups with teachers and parents. And they would look at the academic achievement outcomes and the current curriculum that is being implemented, and then come up with recommendations on what is the thinking between the one-way dual language immersion, which would be for the 3 schools, or do the 3 schools, could it be possible that the 3 schools do a 2-way immersion program?
Would that be, the two-way immersion, would that be
The 2-way immersion would be
like Southwest?
like
all
Southwest.
right.
And parents would have the option at those 3 schools, Cesar Chavez, Burton, and Buchanan, to either do a dual language immersion track or just a regular English track.
And then, would the school then, if they decide on the dual immersion, would the entire school be dual immersion?
Southwest would stay dual language immersion,
Right.
but the 3 other schools,
It would change the whole school's
No.
environment or
No.
2 paths?
it would be two paths.
Okay.
Right? So the decision or the information that they would gather would be, in those 3 schools, is it better to go with a one-way immersion program, which is just for Spanish speakers, or a 2-way, which would encompass Spanish and English speakers? So they would they would look at everything that's happening in those 3 schools. They would take parent input, teacher input, and then they would come up with a recommendation. We could follow the recommendation or not, but it's a way of looking at the programming that we're seeing now in all 4 schools, seeing how we can better what we're doing what we're implementing for our students, and then also what they would do is make recommendations for future professional development.
So not only would it be deciding the future of whether or not it's dual immersion or staying the way it is at Buchanan, Burton, and Cesar Chavez, but they would also be assessing how to make any of those 4 schools more productive.
Yes, but Southwest would stay dual language.
Correct, but
Right.
could this report provide some feedback to Southwest on maintaining the dual immersion, but these things might
Yes.
help?
Yes, because the Center for Applied Linguistics, I should have brought the book, but they also have specific guidelines and standards for dual language immersion schools. So when they come for their audit, they'll look at all those standards and then match them up with what's happening at the school buildings. And then they'll come up with recommendations on moving forward, what might we do? It's a recommendation, it's not something like you must do this. It's another way of looking at our programming and see how we can make it even better.
Now, I'm wondering, so basically, you're going to have parents choose whether or not they want to be in a totally English class or a
So
bilingual class?
currently, parents choose Southwest, it's a themed school.
Yes, yes,
Southwest would stay the same.
Okay, but what about in the other buildings?
In the other 3 buildings, parents would choose whether they would want their child in a dual language immersion or one-way. There would only be 2 paths, either a one-way language immersion or a 2-way language immersion. And then the second path would be the English only.
So the neighborhood schools.
Right.
So the students in that neighborhood that would be their school. So the choice would be, if this was chosen, if we followed these recommendations, these potential recommendations would be to create 2 paths within a school. So they would have a choice within the
So
school building.
parents would have the choice for their child to be bilingual which in the past, some parents want that and some parents don't, right? And that's a parent's choice and
But if we
prerogative.
implemented a bilingual program, say at Chavez, then they would be forced to send their kids to a bilingual school even if they didn't want that.
No, Chavez would have two paths.
No, I'm saying if we kept it, if we made a change without without creating two paths. I'm sorry. If we made the change and just decided Chavez is a bilingual school, then we would be taking away that choice from the parents.
Right.
So this would allow them potentially a choice within the school.
Right, and it would also talk to parents and teachers and get their input on it.
Yeah.
I think the thing I think about is, and maybe you've considered this already, but what if you have, 60 new kids coming into kindergarten or first grade, and they're going to make a choice, and, 50 of them want the dual immersion, and only a few want the straight English thing, then what do we do then, as far as,
Well, that's why they would have focus groups during this audit to
Okay.
find out what parents and community want.
okay,
And then they would come up with a report.
okay. So we
And-
aren't to that point yet,
No, this is a proposal that
just to work on those 3 schools to begin with.
the
So this is
audit
so one thing, to back up a little bit, which is important, is that
Right, I think
this
that's-
proposal went to the to the finance committee. The finance committee said, this is something that should be viewed by the academic achievement committee before it's approved by, and that does fit with our
Yeah.
previous policy discussions that academic curriculum, textbooks, et cetera, should come through this committee, then go to the finance committee. And we can talk about a process for that in a way, because I don't want to get in the way of things that need to happen. But, so this, I don't know if we'd actually vote on it, but we kind of give our vote of confidence to send it to the finance committee. They would decide whether or not to bring it to the full board, and then the full board would decide
Right.
whether or not to fund this audit.
This audit,
Not, we wouldn't be voting whether or not to implement these changes. We
Changes,
would be
just the
voting
audit.
on the audit,
right.
on the
So
expense for the audit.
Right.
the proposal, which is more detailed than the PowerPoint, includes the days and how many, it's very on page 2, if you want to look at it. It includes the exact dates, the school visits. We haven't we haven't put the schools in yet, because we would want to talk to the principals and see what dates are most convenient for each school. We would want the principals to pick that out. The principals are aware of this and are open, they're embracing this. So they have, it's not like I've not talked to them about it. We've talked about this. Actually, before we talked about the proposal for Cal, we talked about the possibility of those 3 other schools doing a one-way or a two-way. But then, in conversation, we thought it's best to do an audit, to find out where we are in implementation, to find out what parents think, what community members think again, before we go and do something.
So that's where you're going to have to really start considering class size or whatever the case may be.
And then the implication also, depending upon where the decision, what decision is made, is also staffing. Because then you need more staff that's bilingual. But in the end, you're gonna have more students, whether it be primary language students that are Spanish-speaking or primary language students that are English-speaking, that are bilingual.
This would also allow, this is a question, would this allow then students from those 3 schools to be ready if they wanted to attend Southwest Community Campus High
So
School?
that was brought up too in a community meeting. So
Right.
this would prepare
Right.
students at those 3 schools to take the test to get into Southwest. Because at this point, the 3 schools that we're talking about, students do not have the ability, given the curriculum taught in English majority, to pass that test unless at home their parents are working with them on the reading and the writing skills. So it would give more students an opportunity
Right.
for later on in their career.
Which was a criticism from the neighborhood, that the new high school would not be accessible to more kids from that neighborhood because they weren't able to pass this test.
Okay.
So,
Well, because the current feeder school system doesn't
right.
prepare them to be duly.
Right. So
Yeah.
this audit really came out of all of the feedback that we got at that time.
Yeah, which is great. It's,
I'm reading, just obviously skimming over the Center for Applied Linguistics. Can you give any sort of background on how you became familiar with this
How I became familiar-
organization and
Yeah.
why this organization?
This organization has been a key organization in bilingual education for many, many years. I've been familiar with them, and I've taken professional development from them.
Okay.
And it's highly respected. If, you don't have to take my word for it if you Google it. It's highly respected in the field of bilingual education and dual language immersion. And the dual language immersion schools around the country use their standards for dual language immersion implementation.
Okay.
So I do not have stock in Cal, but professionally,
curious.
they're very well respected.
Okay, thank you.
And these are the two essential questions that the report is going to be focused in, the proposal, and their findings will be focused on. It's on, you can see, can you see the PowerPoint?
yes.
Okay. So they're looking at current policies and practices at those 4 schools and how they're being implemented, how students are learning to be bilingual and biliterate. And they would also discuss with us and talk to us about whether the 3 schools would be better off transitioning to a one-way dual language immersion or a dual language immersion. And then these are the guiding principles for dual language education that is written by Cal, and those are the different areas that they'll be looking at during the audit. They will also be interviewing, like I said, and having focus groups during their visit. And then they would give us a report back in the spring.
So basically, right now, all we're doing is we're giving our okays for the finance committee to approve the audit,
Right.
because that's going to cost us
Because
money.
it costs $29,000.
Okay,
And originally, it was going to be for less money, and they were only going to come and audit 2 of the 4 schools. But it would behoove us to look at the 4 schools instead of half of the schools.
right.
What's the potential, what's the data saying of the potential to attract more families if these 4 schools, whether they're one way or 2 ways, what would be the attraction to new families, or for that matter, current families that would want to see dual enrollment or a better bicultural child coming out of our schools? Do we potentially see an increase in student in attracting new families to our schools as a result of?
I don't have hard data because I can't say 100% of our families want that. But my hunch is, my educated hunch would be that it would be a recruitment and retention strategy for our district, especially in that corridor. Because that corridor, not only in the corridor, but in the whole district, of course, if you didn't live in that corridor, you'd have to put it, those 3 schools are neighborhood schools. So if you wanted to go there, you'd have to have a transfer, but that corridor is right next to our other neighbors. And we
Good for
want to,
me.
and we want to bring back or continue to keep our students. And I would say, my hunch would be, as a parent, that I would be very interested in that for my child.
Yeah, especially if it leads to them going to the high school, the Southwest High School. If,
And then you get a seal, you could potentially get a seal of biliteracy on your diploma, and that would bring more opportunities. And we know that the key to success is education, but then greater success also if you're bilingual or trilingual. Opens just more doors for you.
I also think that overall, this is going to help us to know better how we're educating all the children in the schools that come from bilingual families or monolingual families, and it's not English. So we will learn a lot.
It
from
gives
this.
us a
It's
little
really very-
peek
yeah,
at
Yeah.
Yeah.
how best to implement our dual language immersion models or model, and give us also insight on what our community wants, what our parents want.
I agree. I think it has potential to bring a lot of valuable insight in a bunch of different areas. I think it's wonderful that it will include the community. I think that says a lot about what we value and the voices we want to hear. And I just love the idea of valuing not only the language is very valuable, but the culture. And I mean, it truly is beautiful what happens at Southwest and the events and the projects they do. And so I also want to say that I think it would be wonderful to hear what they would have to say about professional development for all of those buildings. Because I think teachers that are teaching students whose primary language is not English, and teachers who are doing the dual immersion have challenges that teachers in other buildings don't experience as much. So I think highlighting professional development for them would be wonderful.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Is this the first time that we're actually evaluating these 4 kinds of transitional schools, like in the history of
In an audit?
GRPS?
Yes.
Yeah.
From what I remember, I've been in this district for 29 years. It's probably dating me. I started when I was 10.
Good for you.
No, you don't look over 49. 49.
But I believe so. I don't know of any other audit. There might have been, but like this.
Yeah, I love that it's experts in this.
I would, it would be really great once this is done. I know the report will be presented to administration, but it would be great to either have that report presented either by them or by you
Okay.
here, or I think even the full board. I mean, to be honest, I think that
Yeah.
it would be better if the full board got a chance to hear the findings of this, because we all get, I mean, those of us that just ran for election, or those of us that work in that community, or those of us that have kids in that neighborhood, hear these kinds of questions all the time. And so I think that we all need to be able to know what it is we're doing to educate this increasingly larger population of students. So.
Now, when let's say your kid should go to Aberdeen or Palmer or something like that, and they don't speak English, do we send them over to another school, or?
So the language centers
Oh, okay,
are
the
according
language
to
center.
where you
Okay,
live.
okay.
You don't have to go. You could stay at Aberdeen. That's a parent's choice. But many parents choose to send their students whose primary language is not English to language centers.
Okay. And we have 17 of them, and are they connected?
We have 17 of them, but that's from elementary to high school.
And is that all under our auspices, from Grand Rapids
Yes.
Public Schools?
Yes, yes. They're all GRPS.
Okay.
Okay, so I don't know that we actually, I mean, I think that, who was at the finance, because none of us were at the finance committee. What did they actually ask for?
They asked, there was one particular board member that asked if we had gone to academic achievement, and we did not. We did, that was, I apologize.
well, no, I don't
didn't-
think that you
was an
should
oversight
apologize
on my
because-
part.
It has been, but only recently, a discussion that we should make sure that happens. So it should not be, you should not feel the need to apologize for it because we haven't done that. We've only recently been saying, well, maybe we ought to. So that's not a concern. So, but they didn't, I don't think that we need to vote on this because it's not really our vote, but I would say that you could say that you've been to the Academic Achievement Committee meeting, and I would say that we all seem to be enthusiastic about this. You enthusiastic, John?
Yeah, I mean, my encouragement is flushing out, making sure that the schools and the principals and the community is on board, that you have, more than, I don't want to put a percentage, but there needs to be some really good turnout of teacher involvement, of parent involvement, of students if they're going to interview them, so that we get the best possible outcome, so that we can be visionaries about what you're going to propose. When you come out of it, you're going to be able to say, I believe as a director that we should head this way, in this way, because of these pieces. The community said this, and then challenging, obviously, the personnel, professional development, the funding that's going to be needed to make that transition something that the board can get behind and say, you know what, we're gonna have to, we're gonna have to squeeze some money out. How are we gonna do that and figure out how, as the board, we can promote that and bring partnerships or whatever we need to that will challenge us to meet that.
We will make
that
sure
need.
we have,
So-
we do that. And the other thing is, this proposal, this audit is being paid through Title III. I've spoken to MDE, and it's through title grant money. They know about that, because when you're restructuring, when you want to look at restructuring maybe, or making it something better, they allow you to use Title III monies. So I just wanted to make a point of that. And because we originally were wanting to do this audit sooner in the school year, but it was pushed back, so we're looking to have that report in May, which I think is still fine, and it's needed.
Yeah, it's very exciting. I mean, yeah, clearly our community is one that appreciates dual language and cross-cultural, so this is going to bring a lot of excitement in people's minds to the K-12 system for Grand Rapids, especially if it continues to potentially head dual language and those kinds of things. I think that a lot of people are going to say, yep, I want my kid in that. And then all these centers that exist are going to start to attract, and encourage our teachers too to either become more bilingual or get the professional learning that they really need. So, awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you. I do have a process comment, though. So, Finance Committee meets monthly. There are times that people need to buy things and before the next finance meeting, and so it goes to the board, the full board, and I think that when it goes to the full board, then that full board can act as the Finance Committee and ask the questions that they typically wouldn't ask if it was on. So usually the purchasing agenda, if it's gone through finance, it just is on the consent agenda. If it hasn't gone through finance, it's on the regular agenda, and then we discuss it as an action item. I think that the same thing can happen for this. So I would say that in the future, if there was a time-sensitive decision that needed to be made, we shouldn't have to wait till the next Academic Achievement Committee meeting.
Okay.
And I think that would, just for you guys
Thank you for
to
that
know. Yeah,
clarification.
because, I mean, especially if we're putting off when they start their study or something, because now it has to go back to the finance committee.
We'll
And then it
take
has to
this
go to the
back.
full board. And, and so
We'll
by the
take
time you
this
get back to the
back.
full board, I think that you could kind of streamline it by just saying, well, we need this decision sooner. Can we take it to the full board? And then both committees can discuss it at once. So I just, for future reference.
All right.
Yeah,
I
think that you could do
appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Because we do that often with finance committee decisions, so. All right. We do need to discuss when our next meeting is, because the next planned meeting happens to be January
Want me
1st.
to get rid of that, or that's all right?
And evidently,
Which is,
I'm available, but evidently Jonathan and Ron, you know, and the staff, they're not.
They don't wanna
interested
come back
working that
in?
day,
they'll
So,
call in from the Bahamas or something, right?
Yeah.
yeah. And we would have our first regularly scheduled board meeting on January 6th. So, did we
So
discuss?
I think the question was there, we were trying to decide between the 8th and the 9th, I thought, if that was an option. 'Cause it's not on the calendar right now, so.
The 8th and the 9th, or the 8th and the 15th?
Or because you know how this meeting is on a Wednesday?
Yeah, we
We
had to-
had changed 2 meetings to Wednesdays, but I
No,
don't
we're
think
cha- we
that
actually-
went
we-
into January.
we
There
actually-
are no committee meetings scheduled for January because you guys have to have your organizational meeting. So the calendar stops in January.
Yep.
For every committee. We don't have.
Actually, so we should clarify that. It's my impression that we actually, and it's partly because I think it was my idea a few years ago to do it. So that we proceed with January, that the January committee follows the previous years until after the implementation of the.
Oh, I think we did it that way,
yeah.
didn't we?
Yeah, so basically, this committee
committee would stay as
this committee, as
council.
it's currently constituted, would go through January. The only time it wouldn't work out that way is if there was an election and the people changed, but we would have, so we would like to leave January as a date
So we'll find a date right now.
right now, yeah. And that, with that in place, it would stay on Wednesdays, because Reverend Matthias can't make Thursdays.
So that would be January 8th then?
Yeah,
So
January
that's
8th.
after, coming back after break.
Yep.
Yeah, because the first day back is the 6th, is that correct?
Yep.
Yes,
And we would have our first board meeting on the 6th,
yes.
but it would be possible for us to make changes to the committees in January, but that wouldn't take place until February.
And as far as we know right now, 4:30 start time is good for the 8th.
Yeah, so she just
Unless
gets,
I'm principal.
she gets to be principal for a day, not the whole
that was
month.
today.
That's why she was, it's principal for a day, you know, so it's
Yeah,
like, it's kind of, is that like a model UN, you know? It's
Is
like-
that what did you make any decisions? Did you?
Any-
Not
anybody
any,
get fired
any
or-
huge decisions.
Any kids get
I made
suspended?
decisions.
You didn't get
Have
to
you
touch
ever
the
read
red
the
button?
statistics on how many
The red
decisions
button? No.
educators make in a day?
So that means that you spent the day going to meetings. Anyway,
Airline traffic control.
we shouldn't do this on camera.
It's true.
Anything else before we close? All right. Okay, thanks. We'll see you guys in
All right.
sometime soon.
Thank you.
So, thanks. Thanks,
Thank
Maida.
you.
Good work, Maida. Appreciate
Yeah,
it.
thank you so
Yeah.
much.